Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today as we have a discussion about a subject matter that we find pretty interesting. And that is so we've got this problem out there that's going on right now. You've got various cybersecurity regulations and privacy regulations that are putting more requirements on companies to protect their data. And one of the requirements relates to any company's ability to monitor the threats to its networks and to its data. And so, but how do you do that? How do you do it? Well, historically, and there's actually one regulation. There's a regulation, the New York Department of Financial Services regulation, which um, regulates financial services organizations doing business in New York. They're very specific about this issue and talk about it specifically. So we're going to talk about this issue today. But the people who are going to be talking to you are going to be Mitch Tannenbaum and Ray Hutchins. We're the owners of a company called Cybersecurity, headquartered in Denver, Colorado. We're a full-service cybersecurity company, and we grapple with these issues all the time. And we want to share with you what we have learned about this issue. Both of us are the owners of this company. We come at cybersecurity differently. I come at it from a background of owning companies and having to, but not a deep IT background, but having been responsible for IT for the organization and responsible for security. And Mitch comes at it from a different background. Which I'll let him explain at this time. Mitch, please introduce yourself and explain your background.
So, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My background includes real-time command and control software development and other software development, managing software development teams, building data centers, and general IT operations. So that's my background. As part of that, information security has always been a component, and that includes whether we're in the defense sector or whether we're in the financial services or whether we're in healthcare. All those sectors have a requirement for a strong cybersecurity, so that was always part of my responsibility. I've held the title of Chief Information Officer, Chief Technical Officer, and Chief Information Security Officer at different times in different organizations. Now, Ray says that there's regulations that require you to go do this, but let's be really clear here. If you are a company that uses technology, other than maybe having an isolated standalone brochureware style website, you're at risk. The bad guys are coming after you because they don't target people. When we look at the Equifax breach in 2017, right? Did not turn out, that was not somebody that was targeting Equifax. That was somebody, what we call a spray and pray attack, where they send out a couple of million emails. They'll go scan a chunk of the IP address space of the entire internet and just see what they find. So from that perspective, it turns out that Equifax hadn't installed some patches and they got caught. Big, small, makes no difference. We've seen companies, 5, 10 employees who've been hit. We've seen companies, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 employees have been hit. So it really doesn't make any difference. The real question is, do you want to know that the bad guys are attacking you? Or do you just want to wait until, like the Democratic National Committee, the FBI comes knocking on your door and says, hey, by the way, we're watching these bad guys attacking your system? Or maybe Lockheed Martin, where they come and say, hey, all that F-35 stuff, it's all been stolen. The Chinese all have that now. Is that a problem for you? So no matter whether you have a regulatory requirement or not, you really do need to understand this whole issue of how do I know when a bad guy is trying to attack my system.
Now, this is not an easy subject to talk about. There's quite a bit to it. And today's going to be part one. We're going to do several parts. We don't know how many parts yet, but today is part one. And the reason that we're here today and wanting to share this with you is that we're into it up to our elbows right now because we've got some customers who need to have this monitoring of their networks going on, but they can't afford the typical $50,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 a year price tag for the equipment. Then throw on top of that a human being to actually run the equipment. It's just too much. They don't have it, but they know they need to do it. So we've been tasked with, help us find something to make this thing happen. Go out there and look for this thing. So we've been doing that. And so we're gonna bring you, first of all, our overview of this subject matter of this because if you're talking about cybersecurity in this area, you've got people, processes, and products, right? So we're talking about the products of monitoring threats to a network, and the broad product categories that fit this. So that's where we're going to start here today.
So let's start with what it is you need to do. So the first thing you need to do is you need to log security related events. So you want to be able to know after the fact, if you think somebody got in there, you want to know what are the things. Did someone log in at 2:00 in the morning? You know, if I'm logging events and the event logger shows that Ray logged in at 2:00 in the morning from an IP address in China, then I can go off and ask Ray, hey, you know, were you in China this morning at 2:00? Because it says you logged in from there. And if Ray says, no, I wasn't in China, I'm pretty sure I wasn't in China, then we have reasonable assumption at that point that somebody more nefarious than Ray was in there. So logging is number one. The monitoring of the logs is number two. Logging gets you so much, but not a whole lot, because if you're not looking at the logs, then you're not going to know what's in them. So you got to monitor the logs. And then the third piece is you got to generate alerts when you see something bad. When I see that Ray logged in from China at 2:00 in the morning, or Mitch logged in from Malaysia at 2:00 in the morning, then I know there's a problem. So how do I, first of all, first question is, how do I log? Well, most systems have the ability to log, but the problem is if the log is on that system, then first of all, you need to go look at every system that you have, and likely that's a lot of systems, whether some of them are in the cloud or some of them are in your data center or some of them are wherever. You don't want to do that. And then the second thing is that if the bad guys are moderately talented, they're going to erase the logs. So what you want to do is you want to take the log in as close to real time as you can and send it somewhere. The traditional tool to go do that is a SIEM, SIEM, Security Incident and Event Management, or Security Event and Information Management. There's a lot of different names for it. But the traditional product is a piece of software that you either install on a software or runs in the cloud as a service, either one. And you take the logs in real time. You get them off the box that the hacker has access to and put them in one general place. So now, assuming you go implement something like this and you can license those things as a product, as open source products, a lot of different solutions, then you've got to the point where at least you've collected the log data. That's a piece of the equation, but that's only a piece of the equation. So now the question is, how do I monitor that? Well, assuming you have any significant number of machines, more than a handful, and assuming you're logging the number of events that you really want to be logging, then the number of log records in any given day are going to be a lot. You don't want to sit there and scroll through the logs one record at a time. You know, you'll be bleary-eyed in a matter of a few minutes. So you want some software to go do that. In theory, the SIEM systems go do that. And then the next thing you want is a system that goes off and correlates that data.
So it's logging, it's monitoring, and analysis, okay, kind of happens in there before you get to the alerting part.
So the analysis part is the thing that's looking at that log data, trying to figure out what's an unusual event, and will then generate an alert, however you want to generate an alert, you know, page, an email, phone call, whatever it is that you want. So that's kind of the basis of it. Traditionally, you know, up till a couple of years ago, that was really your only choice if you wanted to go do that. And now we're seeing, in addition to the very traditional, most of the telecom carriers like the Verizons and AT&Ts of the world, the CenturyLink, they all offer SIEM as a service. But now we're starting to see companies like Microsoft Azure has just announced a product called Sentinel, and Google has announced a product called Roadshow. So we're now seeing those guys starting to go implement that. What we believe is going to happen, and that's going to take a little while to go off and occur, to mature, is we're going to see a downward trend in both the complexity of implementing such a solution and the cost of such a solution. And as Ray said, you know, we're seeing for a moderate size organization, couple hundred employees, 1,000 employees, spending somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000 a year for the software or the service, not counting the person that you need to have to go off and respond to things. So this is not an inexpensive solution, but we haven't found a whole lot better. What we're now seeing is a new class of products.
So first and historically, just to make it clear, you just had the SIM. That was your option for logging, monitoring, analysis, and alerting. That's what we had. And so, it certainly was better than nothing. And your option was to either get this as an on-premise solution or using a managed security service provider. Those were your two options for this. But now there's been some changes, and there's some new products hitting the market now, and we're going to introduce you to those products and what they're called, because there's also confusion around the nomenclature associated with these product categories as well.
So one of the categories is called network detection and response, or NDR. So in the case of NDR, they are looking at the traffic on the network, and they are looking for anomalous events. And we'll talk about in a second what the implications, the difference between these two are. But rather than going off and collecting log files and analyzing them, they're looking at network traffic. And we've seen, in the last couple of years, different products in this space. And there actually have been companies that score your security posture. One of those that we're associated with is called BitSight, that use that network detection strategy on the outside of your network, the public side of your network. But these products, NDR products, are doing this inside your network, and they're running throughout your network in all of your branches, your data centers, and whatever. And they are doing different things, but some of them are looking at network data flow. Others are capturing packets, and you can generate a real pot full of data as a result of that. Most of those products do not store that data for a long period of time, which is a challenge for people that have a compliance requirement. If you go look at the recent Marriott Starwood breach, right, it was 4 years in the making. Boy, that sounds like a blockbuster movie, huh? 4 years before they discovered that was a problem. So many of these NDR products will keep 30, 60, 90 days worth of data. If you're trying to go back and figure out what happened 4 years ago, many times SIM products don't keep that data, but at least it's possible. But for the most part, NDR products don't keep that data very long either. So Ray, you want to talk a little bit more about that, and then I'll talk about the next category of products?
Sure. Well, with respect to network detection and response, I want to come back up just a second. And that was this terminology, network detection and response. This came from Gartner. And SIM, when you're talking about SIM, Gartner's done its Magic Quadrant report. You can look up, you can see all the players are in that category. For this NDR category that Gartner came up with, they don't have this Magic Quadrant yet. They haven't figured that thing out. But other ways, other terminology that's being used for NDR is network performance, monitoring and diagnostics, network traffic visibility and analysis. And then there's this thing called threat hunting that's in there as well. It's kind of associated with all of this. So I wanted to kind of get that, because for me, getting this nomenclature straight and understanding what I'm talking about is always important for me to try to understand all these cybersecurity products that are out there. Now, you had asked me a question there, Mitch, and what was that question?
I think you did that. You answered it.
Okay.
Before I moved on. So when we start looking at these network traffic flow products, they want to make a distinction that they're looking at they're capturing packets, they're looking at the packets, they're looking at the flow, they're looking at things like DNS queries and responses, they're looking at a whole bunch of different things like that, and they're trying to make decisions based on that. If we go look at probably the biggest singular weakness of a SIM product is that you have to plan in advance. You have to know what it is you want to capture and capture it and keep it. And you have to make sure that when a new system comes online, that you add it to the SIM arsenal so that, and we've seen this many times where, a company will go off and implement a new system. They'll forget to go off and add its data flow into the SIM. And now that what's going on with that system is completely invisible to the SIM. So that's probably the single biggest weakness. It's complicated in that you have to understand what's going on your network, and you have to keep it current. So that's the challenge with a SIM. If we look at some of the network traffic flow and network detection processes, you don't need to worry about that. If there's traffic on the network, it'll catch it. The problem is, and depends who you talk to, somewhere between 80 and 95% of the traffic on the network is encrypted. So unless you're going to put some sort of man in the middle in there to decrypt the traffic and re-encrypt it, which you can do, and some of the bigger companies who are using network traffic flow and network detection technologies are doing that, you're restricted to looking at packet headers and IP address pairs and anomalous traffic. But still, for example, if you have a web server which is used to receiving a coffee can full of data every hour and sending out even less data than that, and all of a sudden you're seeing the equivalent of a 30-gallon trash can going out every hour, it doesn't matter whether you can actually see what that data is. You have a problem at that point. So the folks that are looking at network detection, they're saying, we're looking for unusual traffic patterns, and I'm a big fan of behavior to go off and try to find the bad guys, because the bad guys are going to be doing things that are anomalous unless they're really, really clever. They're doing things that are anomalous that, if you looked at the baseline of what your systems were doing prior to the bad guys getting in, then these guys are going to change that pattern. If we look at Equifax, for example, and they're losing data on 140 million people, if we're looking at the F-35 loss, we're looking at terabytes worth of data going out, and this may well be going out to servers in the United States if the attacker is smart, because they'll stage the data in the United States so it doesn't look like you're going internationally, but ultimately it does go internationally. But still, you're seeing a lot more traffic than you used to. Well, that should by itself be something that you alert on, and the network traffic guys can do that. The biggest problem I would say with SIM products is you've got to know in advance what it is you're trying to do.
So let's throw in one more element in this conversation for today. Remember, this is
Cool.
part one. We're gonna be bringing you information about specific products, things we're learning about specific products, and we're going to be in part 2 and part 3 and whatnot. We're going to be bringing you also pricing, what we're learning these things are cost, and how to deploy it. And we've already got some ideas about how to deploy it in a cost-effective manner. One more thing, one more element we'll bring in is this thing called threat hunting. Okay, and so now threat hunting, of course, you're looking for threats, and there is, with these behavior analytics platforms, the NDR things, they are looking for threats. Obviously, they're trying to see things are not behaving correctly, and they're trying, to the extent possible, they're trying to automate this process, obviously, because you can get more done automated, but they're not able, the technologies that we have seen thus far, it's not fully automated. And so there's a thing called threat hunting as a service that some of these outfits are offering to help supplement the technology itself. Mitch, can you expound on that, please?
So a threat hunter is a professional who is trained to be able to look at the output of either a SIM or a network traffic flow or a NDR product, and be able to run down the rabbit trails. If you go look at whatever it is you're looking at with any of these products, you get a data element that says, hey, I just saw this server connect to a server in China. Okay, great. That's wonderful. But the next question is, now what? What does that mean? Well, you take somebody who is a threat hunter, who does this as a profession, and other than the very largest companies, nobody is going to go off and be able to justify doing this internally. But a threat hunter is going to go look at that and say, okay, let's take a look at this IP address. Have we ever seen it before? What does the traffic pattern look like? Who's the user that's logging on? Does it make sense? What is the data that we see? A lot of these tools will go off and actually capture the individual packets. Are the packets encrypted? Are they encrypted using a standard encryption? Or are they using something which we've never seen before? If we've never seen it before, probably maybe a bad guy. So we're taking these people who have a great deal of experience and a great deal of expertise and training, and we're layering that on top of the data and the alerts that we have, and using that to give you the best possible indication of something bad going on. One of the things you don't want, we see this, unfortunately, the SIM products have a history of this, is too many false positives. Too many times where you get a message that says you're under attack when you're not under attack. And then at some point, you just start ignoring the messages. So if you engage a threat hunter as a service, then that threat hunter is the one who is looking at those alerts and trying to figure out which ones are false positives and which ones are real, and then only filtering the ones which have a very high probability of being a bad person, and telling you to act on those.
So if you think, okay, we're talking about SIMs, we're talking about NDRs, threat hunting. If you think SIMs are dead and being taken over by NDRs, no, not so fast, for a couple of reasons. You still got to be looking at those logs, right? You still got to be, something's got to be collecting those logs. That's number one. And that's kind of part of our view of how things are going to go. But then there's another part of that. These SIM companies have been around a long time. We've been, working with Solutionary that was bought by NTT. We know Steve Eidelman, who started Solutionary. These people have been around a long time. They know this business. They are evolving as well, and starting, from what we're understanding, starting to bring this behavioral analysis stuff into their products as well. So this is a changing environment. And again, back to why we're here talking to you today, we have been tasked by our customers to try to find solutions that they can afford that do this. And that's what we're looking to discover, and that's what we're going to report to you. So I think for today, Mitch, I don't know, you wrap things up for us, but I think we've made this go on long enough today. Wrap things up, and we'll start putting together content for number 2 here.
I think this is a very interesting topic right now because of the changes we're seeing. 5 years ago, network detection and response didn't exist. There's not even a magic quadrant yet, so that is an indication of how new it is. Threat hunting is new, except maybe in the military where it's been around a little bit longer. What we're seeing with our friends at Google and at Microsoft, that's new, and hopefully all of this will give the user, the company that it needs this kind of service, more choices at a more cost-effective and less complex way of doing that. So next time we'll go into more detail, but for now, if you have questions, if you have a need, please reach out to us. Go to cybersecurity.com, security spelt with a C, and we'll be happy to assist you.
Thanks for joining us today. Hope you learned something. Hope we were of value to you. Thank you.